My name is Brooke Ellison, and I am 28 years old. There are friendships that feel like safety nets, the kind you lean on without thinking twice. Then there are the ones that quietly turn into traps. I learned the difference the hard way in Fargo, North Dakota, inside the sleek glass office building where I had worked for 5 years. I thought I had built something steady there, a good job in marketing a boyfriend who came home to the same apartment every night, and a best friend who knew every detail of my life since we were 19. I never imagined the two people I trusted most would use that knowledge to dismantle everything. It started on a Tuesday morning in early spring. I was at my desk on the 4th floor, finishing slides for a client presentation that could finally get me the promotion I had been chasing. The office was quiet except for the low hum of computers and the occasional ring of a phone. I had just sent the final version to my boss when an email popped up from HR. The subject line was simple, quick check-in regarding team dynamics. No details, just a request to stop by Rachel Quinn's office after lunch. Rachel was the HR manager, a woman in her early 40s, who always spoke in careful, neutral sentences. I liked her well enough. She had helped me navigate my benefits when I first started. Still, something about the email made my stomach tighten. I told myself it was nothing. People had off days. Projects got stressful. I closed the laptop and headed to the break room for coffee. That was where I ran into Paige. Paige Sullivan had been my best friend for almost 9 years. We met in college, stayed close after graduation, and even helped each other land jobs at the same company 2 years ago. She worked in client relations 2 floors down, but we ate lunch together almost every day. She knew about my fights with Connor, my worries about my parents back in Minnesota, and the exact way I took my coffee. When she saw me that morning, she smiled the same warm smile she always had. "Hey," she said, sliding into the chair across from me. "You look tired? Everything okay with the presentation?" I nodded and stirred sugar into my cup. "Almost done. Just waiting on final numbers from finance." She leaned forward, lowering her voice even though no one else was nearby. "Listen, I heard something yesterday that bothered me. Someone said you've been taking credit for work that isn't yours. That you've been, I don't know, positioning yourself for the promotion by making the rest of the team look bad." The words landed like a slap I hadn't seen coming. I set my spoon down slowly. "Who said that?" Paige shrugged, looking genuinely concerned. "I don't know. It was just floating around. I wanted to tell you before it got worse. You know how fast things spread here." I stared at her. We had been through everything together. Breakup's family stressed the time her car broke down at 2 in the morning, and I drove 40 minutes to get her. She had never once hesitated to defend me. Now she was repeating a rumor that could destroy the one thing I had worked hardest for. "Paige, that's not true," I said quietly. "You know how hard I've worked on this account. I've been staying late every night." "I believe you," she said quickly. "Too quickly. I just thought you should know what people are saying. Maybe lay low for a bit. Let someone else take the lead on the next meeting." I felt the first crack open inside my chest. Not anger yet, just confusion. The kind that makes you question whether you remembered a conversation correctly. I thanked her for telling me and went back to my desk, but the rest of the morning blurred. Every time someone walked past my cubicle, I wondered if they had heard the same thing. By lunchtime, the whispering had started. I caught 2 people from the design team stopping their conversation when I walked into the kitchen. One of them smiled too brightly and asked how my weekend was. The other avoided my eyes completely. I ate my sandwich at my desk and tried to focus on the slides, but the words kept looping in my head. That afternoon, I went to Rachel Quinn's office. She sat behind her desk with a folder open in front of her, her expression professional but not unkind. "Brooke, thanks for coming in," she said. "We've received a couple of anonymous concerns about team collaboration on your current project. Nothing formal yet, but I wanted to check in before things escalate. Have you noticed any tension with your colleagues?" I told her the truth. I had been working harder than ever. I had stayed late, taken on extra tasks, and made sure every deliverable was on time. Rachel listened, took notes, and said she would follow up. When I left her office, I felt like I had defended myself, but the pit in my stomach only grew. I called Connor on my way home. He worked in sales for a different company across town, so our schedules didn't always line up. The phone rang 4 times before he answered. "Hey," he said, sounding distracted. "Everything okay?" I told him about the email from HR and what Paige had said. I expected him to get angry on my behalf, the way he usually did when something unfair happened at work. Instead, he was quiet for a long moment. "Maybe you should just focus on doing your job and not worry so much about what people say," he said finally. "Rumors die if you don't feed them." The words stung more than I wanted to admit. I had called him because I needed someone to tell me I wasn't crazy. Instead, he made it sound like I was overreacting. When I got home to our apartment in the quiet suburban neighborhood on the edge of Fargo, the place felt different. The same beige walls, the same couch we had picked out together last year, but the air felt thinner. Connor came in an hour later, kissed my cheek like nothing was wrong, and went straight to the fridge for a beer. He didn't ask any more questions about the day. I lay in bed that night staring at the ceiling while he slept beside me. My mind kept circling back to Paige's face in the break room, the way she had looked concerned while repeating the exact rumor that could cost me everything. I told myself she was just trying to help. That was what best friends did. They warned you, but the crack inside my chest had already started to widen. The next morning, I walked into the office and felt the shift immediately. 3 people who usually said good morning walked past without looking at me. My direct supervisor scheduled a last-minute meeting to review the presentation strategy and suggested I let another team member handle the client questions this time. I nodded and smiled and said I understood, but inside I was screaming. I texted Paige during my lunch break, "Can we talk after work? I'm really struggling with what's happening here." She replied 20 minutes later, "Of course. Meet me at that little coffee place on 45th after 5. I agreed. I needed to look her in the eye and ask why she had repeated something so damaging. I needed to hear her say it was a misunderstanding. When I arrived at the coffee shop, Paige was already there, sitting at a corner table with 2 cups in front of her. She smiled when she saw me, the same smile she had worn for almost a decade. I sat down across from her and tried to keep my voice steady. "Paige, I need to know who told you that rumor about me taking credit, because it's starting to affect my job. Rachel from HR called me in yesterday." She wrapped her hands around her cup and looked down for a second before meeting my eyes. "I don't want to make this worse, Brooke, but people have been noticing things for a while. The way you always volunteer for the high-visibility parts. The way you talk over others in meetings sometimes. I think it's just... people are tired of it." The words hit harder than the original rumor. This wasn't a warning. This was an attack dressed up as concern. I felt my throat tighten. "You've known me for 9 years," I said. My voice came out smaller than I wanted. "You know I would never do that." "Why are you saying these things?" Paige reached across the table and put her hand on mine. The gesture that used to feel like comfort now felt like control. "I'm saying them because I care about you," she said softly. "Sometimes the truth is hard to hear. Maybe this is a chance for you to reflect. Connor even mentioned to me last week that you've seemed really stressed and maybe not yourself lately." My stomach dropped. Connor had talked to her about me behind my back. My boyfriend and my best friend had been having conversations about my mental state without me in the room. I pulled my hand away. "You spoke to Connor about me." She didn't deny it. She just gave me that same concerned look. "He's worried about you, too." "We both are. That's what friends and partners do." I stood up so fast my chair scraped against the floor. Several people turned to look. I didn't care. The betrayal was no longer quiet. It was sitting right in front of me, wearing my best friend's face. "I have to go," I said. Paige stayed seated. She didn't chase after me. She didn't call my name. She just watched me walk out the door with that same soft, worried expression. That night, I confronted Connor at home. I told him everything Paige had said. I asked him why he had gone to her instead of coming to me. He sighed like I was being dramatic and said he had only mentioned I seemed tired, that he was trying to get advice from someone who knew me well. The argument lasted almost 2 hours. He never raised his voice. He never called me names. He just kept repeating that I was overreacting and that Paige was only trying to help. By the end of it, I was crying in the bathroom with the door locked, trying to understand how the two people I loved most had somehow become a united front against me. I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake listening to Connor's breathing and wondering how many other conversations they had had without me. How many times they had agreed that I was the problem. The next morning at work, the cold shoulders had turned into something sharper. An anonymous note appeared on my desk during lunch. It said only 3 words in printed letters we all know. I folded it into my pocket and went straight to Rachel Quinn's office. I showed her the note. I told her about the conversation with Paige. Rachel listened, took the note, and said she would investigate. But her voice had already changed. It was the voice of someone who had already decided there were 2 sides to every story. That evening, I sat in my car in the parking garage after work and cried until my chest hurt. I didn't know who to call. My sister Courtney lived in Minneapolis, and we weren't close. My parents were dealing with my dad's health issues, and I didn't want to add more stress. The only person I had always called in moments like this was Paige. Instead, I drove home to an apartment that no longer felt like mine, and a boyfriend who barely looked up from his phone when I walked in. I didn't know it yet, but the worst part was still coming. The part where I would learn that the betrayal ran deeper than rumors, that someone had been watching me, that my own mother had known pieces of the truth for months and had stayed silent. But on that night, all I knew was that the people I trusted most had started to rewrite my story without me in it, and I had no idea how to stop them. The next few days felt like walking through fog that never lifted. I went to the office each morning with my shoulders pulled tight, smiling at people who no longer smiled back. The promotion I had spent months preparing for quietly moved to someone else on the team without any explanation. My boss, Daniel, called me into his office on Thursday and said the client had requested a fresh face for the next phase. He wouldn't look me in the eye when he said it. I kept telling myself it was temporary, that if I stayed professional and kept my head down, the rumors would run out of steam. But every time I walked into a meeting, conversations stopped. People who used to ask for my input now spoke over me or addressed their questions to anyone else in the room. The isolation was physical. My chest felt hollow every time I sat at my desk. Paige kept reaching out like nothing had changed. She texted me funny memes in the middle of the day and asked if I wanted to grab coffee after work. I ignored most of them until Friday afternoon, when she showed up at my cubicle with 2 cups in her hands. "I know things have been weird," she said, setting 1 cup on my desk. "I just want you to know I'm still here for you. Connor and I talked again last night. He's really worried too." The mention of Connor's name made something inside me go still. I looked up at her. "You talked to him again?" She nodded like it was the most normal thing in the world. "He said you've been crying a lot at home, that you're not sleeping. I told him maybe you should talk to someone, like a therapist. There's no shame in that." The words were soft. The intent underneath them was not. She was painting a picture of me as unstable, and she was doing it with my boyfriend's help. I felt my hands start to shake under the desk. "Paige, stop," I said. My voice came out low and tight. "You don't get to talk about my relationship or my mental health with Connor like you're some kind of counselor. That's not your place." She tilted her head, the same concerned expression she had worn at the coffee shop. "I'm your best friend. Of course it's my place. Who else is going to look out for you if not me?" I stood up. The chair rolled back and hit the cubicle wall. "You're not looking out for me. You're spreading stories that are making it impossible for me to do my job. You're talking to my boyfriend behind my back. That's not friendship. That's something else." For the first time, her smile slipped, just for a second. Then it came back smaller and colder. "You're really going to blame me for people finally noticing how you've been acting," she said. "Brooke, you've been different for months, distant, short with everyone. Maybe if you actually listened instead of getting defensive, you'd see that Connor and I are the only ones still trying to help you." I didn't answer. I picked up my bag and walked out of the office early. I could feel eyes on my back the entire way to the elevator. That night, the fight with Connor was worse than the one before. I told him everything Paige had said in the cubicle. I asked him why he was discussing my private life with her at all. He stood in the kitchen with his arms crossed, looking at me like I was the one being unreasonable. "She's worried about you," he said. "We both are. You've been on edge ever since that HR meeting. You're not yourself. I'm on edge because my best friend and my boyfriend are having secret conversations about whether I need therapy." I shot back. "That's not concern. That's control." He sighed and rubbed his face. "You're twisting everything. Paige has been nothing but supportive. She's the one who told me to check in on you more. She's the one who said I should give you space when you're like this." Like what I asked. My voice cracked on the words. Like someone who's being slowly pushed out of her own life. Connor didn't answer right away. He opened the fridge, took out a beer, and twisted the cap off like the conversation was already over. "Maybe you should take a few days off," he said finally. "Clear your head. You're seeing enemies everywhere lately." I went into the bathroom and locked the door. I sat on the edge of the tub with my phone in my hands and cried until my throat hurt. I didn't recognize the person I was becoming. The one who questioned every memory, every conversation, every small kindness. I had always been the steady one, the one who fixed things. Now I was the problem everyone was trying to manage. On Saturday morning, I called my mother. I hadn't told her much about work, just that things were stressful. She sounded tired when she answered. My dad had been in and out of the hospital with his heart issues, and she was carrying most of it alone. Still, I needed to hear her voice. "Mom, I think something's really wrong here," I said after a few minutes of small talk. "Paige and Connor, they're saying things about me, things that aren't true. It's affecting my job."
There was a long pause on the other end. When she spoke, her voice was careful.
"Honey, sometimes when we're under stress, we can misread people's intentions. Paige has always been a good friend to you. Connor loves you. Maybe give them the benefit of the doubt for a little while." The words landed like another door closing. Even my mother didn't believe me. Or she didn't want to. I thanked her and hung up before she could hear me start crying again. That afternoon, I drove around Fargo with no destination. I ended up in the parking lot of a small park near our apartment, watching families walk their dogs and kids play on the swings. I felt completely untethered. The life I had built here, job, relationship, friendship, had turned into something that no longer included me. When I got home, Connor was on the couch watching a game. He didn't ask where I'd been. I went into the bedroom and started going through old text messages on my phone, looking for proof that I wasn't imagining things. That was when I noticed something odd. Several conversations with Paige from the last few weeks had small gaps. Messages that should have been there were missing. I checked the timestamps. The missing ones lined up with times when Connor had been home alone with my phone. I didn't say anything that night. I lay in bed pretending to sleep while my mind raced. The next morning, I woke up to an email from Rachel Quinn. She wanted to meet first thing Monday to discuss next steps regarding the concerns that have been raised. I spent Sunday in a state of quiet panic. I cleaned the apartment even though it didn't need cleaning. I made a list of everything that had happened in the last 2 weeks, trying to organize the chaos into something that made sense. Every time I wrote Paige's name or Connor's name, my hands shook. Late that night, after Connor had gone to bed, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open. I searched for ways to document workplace harassment. I looked up employment lawyers in Fargo. I didn't know if I had the strength or the money to fight what was happening, but I couldn't just keep letting it happen either. Around midnight, my phone lit up with a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, but something made me swipe the screen. Brooke Ellison, a man's voice said. Low, steady, professional. Yes, my name is Derek Lang. I'm a private investigator. Your mother hired me 3 months ago. I think it's time we talked. I sat very still in the dark kitchen. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator and my own heartbeat in my ears. What I whispered. She asked me to keep an eye on things, he said, especially around your boyfriend and your friend Paige. There's footage. I think you need to see it. The world tilted. My mother had known. She had known enough to hire someone, and she had said nothing. Derek Lang gave me an address in a quiet part of Fargo and told me to meet him the next afternoon. He said it was important that Connor and Paige didn't know we had spoken. I hung up and sat there for a long time with the phone in my lap. Outside the window, the suburban street was dark and still. Inside the apartment I shared with the man who was supposed to love me felt like a stranger's house. I didn't go back to bed. I stayed at the kitchen table until the sun started to come up, replaying every conversation, every look, every small betrayal I had tried so hard to explain away. The crack inside my chest had become a split, and on the other side of it was a truth I wasn't ready to face, but I was going to have to. The call from Derek Lang left me sitting in the dark kitchen until the first gray light came through the blinds. I didn't wake Connor. I didn't text Paige. I just sat with the phone in my lap and tried to understand what it meant that my mother had hired a private investigator 3 months earlier and never said a word. The next afternoon, I met Derek at a small office park on the north side of Fargo. He was in his 50s, calm with the kind of steady voice that made you feel like the floor wasn't going to disappear under your feet. He didn't waste time with small talk. He turned his laptop toward me and played the footage. It was from a hidden camera my mother had asked him to install in our apartment living room 3 weeks earlier. The angle showed the couch and part of the kitchen. Paige and Connor sat there together on a Tuesday night when I had stayed late at the office. They were drinking wine. They were laughing. I told her the HR thing was just the beginning, Paige said on the recording. Once the rumors stick, she'll start doubting herself. She always does when people turn on her. Connor nodded. She already thinks she's the problem. A few more weeks and she'll be begging us to tell her what she's doing wrong. Then we can get her to sign the paperwork for the joint account. After that, it's just a matter of time before she steps back from work completely. Paige raised her glass. To finally having some control. She's been running everything for years. It's exhausting. I watched the rest of the clip in silence. My hands were cold. My chest felt like someone had reached inside and was slowly squeezing. When it ended, Derek closed the laptop. Your mother didn't want you to find out this way, he said quietly. But she also couldn't keep watching it happen without doing something. She's known for a while that they were working together. She just didn't know how to tell you without making everything worse with your father's health. I drove home in a daze. The suburban streets looked the same as they always had. The same neat lawns. The same quiet houses. Nothing outside had changed, but everything inside me had. That evening, I waited until Connor came home. I didn't cry. I didn't raise my voice. I simply played the clip on my phone and set it on the coffee table between us. He watched it without speaking. When it finished, he looked at me for a long time. Then he said, "That's not the whole story." "It's enough," I answered. Paige showed up 20 minutes later. Connor must have texted her. She walked in without knocking, took one look at my face, and tried the same concerned expression she had used for weeks. "Brooke, whatever you think you heard." I heard everything I said. My voice was steady in a way that surprised me. I heard you and the man I live with planning how to make me think I was losing my mind so you could take control of my money and push me out of my job. I heard you laughing about it. She glanced at Connor, then back at me. The mask slipped completely.
"You were never going to step back on your own," she said. Her tone had changed. It was sharper now. "You were going to keep grinding until you burned out and took everyone down with you. Connor and I were just trying to protect you from yourself, from us having to watch you fall apart." The words landed like stones. I felt something break open in my chest, but it wasn't the same crack from before. This one was cleaner. Final.
"You don't get to decide what I need protecting from," I said. "Not anymore." I told them both to leave. Connor tried to argue. At first, then saw my face and stopped. He packed a bag while I stood in the doorway of our bedroom. Paige left without another word. When the door closed behind them, the apartment was so quiet I could hear the clock in the kitchen ticking. The next morning, I went to Rachel Quinn's office with a copy of the footage on a flash drive. I told her everything. She watched part of it, her expression growing more uncomfortable with every minute. When it ended, she said the company would have to investigate. She used words like due process and both sides. I nodded and thanked her and went back to my desk. By the end of the day, the investigation had already turned against me. The anonymous complaints that had started the rumors were now being treated as evidence of a hostile work environment I had supposedly created. 2 colleagues who had been friendly before suddenly remembered times I had been difficult. The promotion was gone. A performance improvement plan was suggested. The message was clear: the company believed the version of me that Paige and Connor had spent weeks building.
I went home and called my mother. She answered on the second ring. Her voice was tired in the way it had been for months. I saw the footage, I said. Derek showed me. There was a long silence. "I should have told you sooner," she said finally. "I kept hoping it would stop on its own. Your father's been so sick, and I didn't want to add this on top of everything. I thought if I just watched and waited, maybe they would back off."
"You knew they were trying to push me out of my own life," I said. The words came out flat. "And you said nothing." "I was trying to protect the family," she answered. "I thought if I confronted them, it would blow everything up." "I didn't want you to lose, Connor. I didn't want you to lose your job. I thought I was choosing the lesser pain." I closed my eyes. "You chose their comfort over mine." She didn't argue. She just said my sister Courtney agreed that making a big scene would only make things harder for everyone, that maybe I should consider taking some time away and letting things settle. I hung up without saying goodbye. The next week passed in pieces. I went to work and did the minimum required while the investigation dragged on. Connor texted a few times asking to talk. I didn't answer. Paige sent one long message full of explanations and accusations. I blocked her number. My father called once, sounding confused and sad, asking if I was really going to throw away my relationship and my job over a misunderstanding. I told him I loved him and that I needed space. On a Friday afternoon, Rachel called me into her office and said the company had decided the best path forward was for me to resign. They would give me a neutral reference if I left quietly. Fighting it would mean a long public process that would damage my reputation further. I signed the papers that same day. I packed the few personal items from my desk while people pretended not to watch. No one said goodbye. That evening, I sat on the floor of the apartment I could no longer afford and cried until I couldn't breathe. The kind of crying that comes from somewhere deeper than sadness. It was grief for the life I had believed was real. Grief for the version of myself who had trusted so completely. Grief for the family that had chosen silence over standing beside me. When the tears finally slowed, I stood up and started packing. I didn't know where I was going yet. I just knew I couldn't stay in the place where every wall held a memory of people who had tried to erase me. I loaded the last box into my car as the sun was setting over the quiet suburban streets of Fargo. My hands were shaking. My eyes were swollen. But for the first time in weeks, the hollow feeling in my chest had a name.
It was the cost of choosing myself when no one else would. I sat behind the wheel and let myself feel it all. The loss of the job I had loved, the loss of the man I had planned a future with, the loss of the friend I had trusted with every secret. The loss of the family that had decided my pain was too inconvenient to acknowledge. Everything I had built was gone. But I was still here.
I started the car and drove away from the apartment, from the office building, from the neighborhood that no longer felt like home. I didn't have a plan. I didn't have safety. I only had the knowledge that I had refused to let them finish rewriting me. Boundaries had cost me almost everything, but they had also saved the one thing that mattered: me. Thank you for listening to my story. If you've ever had to walk away from people you loved, because staying would have cost you yourself, I see you. It's lonely. It hurts in ways that don't have clean words. But you are not wrong for protecting your peace. Would you walk away?